Are we on here?
I believe it's on. Yep. Yes.
Oh,
Yep. I got it.
so I'm going to erase the words here. So, as we were saying yesterday, learning the alphabet is just noticing so you can count numbers. Then learning to spell words is like doing addition and subtraction. Understanding sentences is like putting together mathematics, and then you can start going somewhere. If you want to learn how to play music, you got to understand scales and notes, and you just practice your scales. But no, I as a kid, I just want to play a song. Well, what I didn't realize until many years later, kind of too late, it's never too late, but what I learned later was most songs are simply following scales, up and down scales. That's all they are. So if you practice scales, you are practicing songs. But you think, you don't realize that the fundamental basics is actually the whole thing. It's not that somebody's ripping you off by making you count or making you practice scales, but as you become so familiar that you don't have to think about it. We're talking last night about being able to think in a foreign language. You know, if everything you say you're translating in your mind, you're not fluent. Fluent is thinking in that foreign language. So the difference between people who love math is that they think numbers. And numbers and words are actually just like music. Music is a language. Music's not something other. Music is a language. And it's one of the fundamental languages, you might say, like numbers are a fundamental language of how the universe is composed. We just don't recognize it as that. Well, Hebrew is the fundamental language of how it's all composed. And by showing you the value, which is to say not just, gee, this is worth a lot, but the value meaning what does each letter mean? That's its value. So in mathematics, if you have variables, x and y, and then somebody says, what's their value? Well, if I'm doing mathematics and I have an equation of x over y, I could later say x equals 6 and y equals 10. So the value of x is 6 and the value of y is 10. Now it's no longer a variable that's a phantom unknown, but now we can deal with real concepts and plug them into the rest of the equation. We're doing the same thing with these letters. If these are ghostly, phantom, unknown letters, all they are is shapes. The great thing about that song we just sang, which was by a fellow by the name of Brad Groman, he's down in Salem, Oregon, and he's written many other songs. They're typically what he does is take a very simple melody of a very well-known song, and then he adapts them. In fact, he had taken, the first time I heard him, actually, I think it was at a Sukkot festival, or just a, maybe it was Love for Israel conference or something. But anyway, late one night, sitting out by the fire, he had taken the Hallelujah song by Leonard Cohen, and he wrote half a dozen of other verses to it, all talking about scriptural matters, which Leonard Cohen's song doesn't do. And it was really interesting. It's like, wow, what's he saying? What was that? And it's like, wow, gosh, I want to write those down and so I can look at them and think about them. Because the benefit of this stuff quite often is not, oh, I heard it, now I know it. Yeah, I don't remember, but it's in the pondering. For example, a cook who's making a real nice dish. I can't say half the meal, but let's break it into thirds. A third of the meal that she's preparing, we're actually enjoying right now. It's the scent as she's mixing together the spices and all. And what I've noticed is that throughout, see, we're locked in the kitchen, and quite often, like in the olden days, in the 1700s, the kitchen was a separate building. It wasn't even in the house, like the bathroom was the out house. So you never got these scents. But what I've noticed is as she's cooking throughout the week here, that when she's first putting the ingredients together, there's a certain scent, an aroma, a fragrance. Later on, there's yet another value to the scent. And then later on, once it kind of, what you might say, bakes or comes together, it's a whole different thing. And then the taste is another thing. So the preparation, as she's putting these things together, I hope you're appreciating it. This cinnamon and apple, I think, is what I'm smelling here. But then there's the eating of it, and then there's the benefit of having eaten, which is now it's converted to energy and health dynamic, right? But remember working years ago with a guy who, I'm hungry, you go to the fast food store, you get a hamburger, and it's gone in 3 bites. Okay, let's get back to work. And it's like, doesn't matter what it tastes like. There was no smell. It's just, boiled lard. But boom, gone. No taste. He's missing the taste experience. So the idea of eating slow is not just, well, it's healthier because you can digest. I've heard it said, you should chew your liquids and drink your solids because you're working the saliva in. But I'm saying, why I'm talking about all this, that's the way to read Hebrew. If you just get a translation, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, I know what that means. Let's go on. Boom. No, wait a minute. I'm going to show you one other thing about Bereshit. There's a little bit of a distraction from where we're headed, but just so you can understand what I'm saying. I've talked to a few of you about this, I don't see one here, that game board I was making with the spirals. The reason for that game, it's the inverse of Scrabble. Let me elaborate. In fact, here, these 2 spirals here are the first 2 I made. If I'm saying, hey, learn to read Paleo Hebrew, you have nothing to read because you can't find it. Up until maybe a year or 2 ago, you couldn't even find Paleo on the internet. Now it's all over the place, but different fonts. But if I say, hey, there's a value in learning Paleo and you can't find it, then it's all for nothing. And if this isn't recorded, or if something happens through the recording and it doesn't get out there, which has happened in the past, it's all for nothing. Unless you really know it, you can't look at the modern and write it down because it doesn't exist. So I've taken numerous scriptures and put them in this pattern of a spiral. Why a spiral? It's confusing. You spin around and you get kind of dizzy. It's not designed to go fast. I mean, if you want to read it fast, you can read it in the text of the scripture. But as a game board, in Scrabble, you have an empty table and you draw these little pieces of wood with the letters, and you have to have a vocabulary to invent words to lay on the table. So in this game, the idea is he's already given us the words. He's given us the vocabulary, and that's what's on the board. And as this path, you draw these cards and you try to match the letters. So we're aligning to him. We're not just going off of our own knowledge or imagination base, right? So that's the idea. So the idea is here that as you're playing this game, how many minutes, 1, 2, 3 minutes, does it take to accumulate enough cards to say, oh, my cards match the spelling of that word, so then you throw them down and you move to the next word, and then you try to play that word. Here's an example. If I just said in the beginning, you know what that means, right? Okay, but here I'm going to write this word. Now, if you don't know the phonetics of that word, do you know what it means? Do you know what it says? Okay, so if you were going to play this game, what you're going to do is you're going to stare at this letter shape for a moment. And as you're staring at that letter shape, it doesn't tell you anything necessarily, but as I mentioned before, this is kind of like this tadpole shape, which is an embryo, right? A single cell that sprouts just the first couple cells, and then it grows arms and legs and turns into a body of... That's embedded in here. Or I could say, if you have a tent, I'll draw a 3-dimensional view of a tent here. And then if you put a roof over the tent, what you have is the public side. So if you're going to sit in your tent here, if you wanted privacy, you go around the corner and you get into this side of the tent. Here's the private side as a top view, right? The private side of the tent. And here's the foyer, the public side of the tent. From what I understand, out in the Middle East, this is the way they made tents. This tent here is just one big room because it's not designed as a habitation. It's just a dormitory for sleeping. But if Abraham was going to sit in his tent during the day, he's going to sit in a place where there's some shade, which is in front, and then you go around the corner at night to go to sleep. That's a private space. And from what I understand, that phrase called my father's house, it's referring to this private space back here. So just in studying the shape of the letter bet, one of the forms of the letter bet is this, and another one is that. But see, the reason I chose this form is because that doesn't remind you of an embryo shape or a tadpole shape. And I don't see this footprint of the bet with showing you the Father's house, the private public. That's why I opted not for that. Let me show you something else. If you have a single cell that is fertilized, it starts to grow, a number of cells, and then it sends out, what's the first thing that starts growing out of the nucleus, which essentially becomes the brain? And the eye is an integral part of the brain. So once you have the eye and the brain, what is the part of the body that grows out? Spine. The spine. Brainstem and spine, exactly. So it's extending out of the personal space into the society. That's the letter bet, the personal space and the social space, right? What did Abba do? He who was one, sufficient, needing nothing, he decided to divest himself and make an other, to break open his hegemony, you might say, his autonomy, and have this notion of otherness. But soon as you make an other, it's like the house where the person is single, male or female, there's no conflict. But as soon as you make an other, now you can have companionship and company, but you also have antagonism and conflict, disinterest or other interest or another voice of opinion. So this same letter bet as a prefix letter not only means in, a body you're put in, it means on, which means one's riding, merchab, you know that idea of chariot, horse and rider, on something, it's in reference to this otherness. It means with, hey, that's like collaboration, communion, community, but it also means against otherness. And so some people, in a way of thinking, say bet represents the devil. Why should it be the devil? Because it's that counter, that adversary, and whether somebody chooses to perpetuate and strengthen the adversarial position or conflict, I don't think the day starts just... But then there's like, do you choose to cooperate or not? So bet is not just, it's like there's one of those refrigerator magnets. It says something like, cooperation is everybody doing what I say. Or, you know, something of that equivalent, right? You know. Anyway, I'm just trying to show you there's all this stuff in the bet. So if I'm playing the game or whatever, if you ponder just the letter bet, it doesn't matter what the word spells. It doesn't matter what the sentence says. It doesn't matter that it means that in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. You're just pondering the bet. You can do the same with the Resh and the Aleph and the Shin and the Yod and the Tav. And then if you put these all together, bar, like bar mitzvah is son, we talked about that, pure and clean is what it means. It also means exterior or outside. Well, wait a minute, I thought bet meant in. How can bet resh means exterior? Exterior means exceptional. It's other than everything else. So you can use this word, you mean everything except this. Everything else is no good except this. All these other ideas are not worth listening to except mine. So this concept of bar is exclusivity, which means there's this and there's that. So again, it sets up this distinction. I'm just trying to show you themes simply, and all these can be elaborated more. Then you get this word bet resh aleph. Remember, you were reading Hebrew right to left. B-R-A, which, as Tim was pointing out, it gives form or shape to something that otherwise would not have had that shape. It means to fill up, recuperate, make healthy, and appear as something that's, well, there's half a dozen words for create or make. Yitzar, Yod Zadi Resh is one of them, which is, if you wrap something up like a mummy, paper mache, I believe that's the word, it means to create or form. The word kuf nun he is maker of heaven and earth. So if you look at each one of these different words that means to create or form, you'll get a different sense of what's happening. And then you can also see in other languages words that are spelled similarly or have the same phonetic, which you can extrude or extrapolate or absorb meaning. So any other English word that starts with BRA, you can look in the English dictionary just under those words and read them. Brasserie Montmartre, it was the name of a restaurant in Portland. And isn't that like, it's a type of restaurant, right? Does anybody know what that means? I'm probably ruining the phonetics. Somebody here was speaking French. For what? A pastry shop. And what do you do with pastry? How do you make pastry? You take dough and you pound it. How did he make the heavens and the earth? Brasserie, right? And then it fluffs up and inflates, right? You get a fluffy pastry. There's something about that word that's related to the French word brasserie. That's what I'm saying, okay? So, then you have Aleph Shin is the word fire. It's our word ash. It's pronounced ash, which is what you get from fire. Then you have this word Rosh, which is head, but it's also foundational. Head means pinnacle, which is to say the top, the utmost, the most important. But the foundation is the first thing that you build upon. So Rosh in Hebrew is not only that which is the most important, the highest concern, but the most important, highest concern is the lowest thing that you're standing on. If you have an unstable base, it's going to fall down, which includes doctrines and premises, which is why Tim and Charlene have been going over all week, pounding down that foundation base so that we can build solidly on top of it. And whether or not they're wrong, I went to go build a staircase landing once. And the staircase landing, when it lands on the ground, doesn't support much of any structure. It's the other end of the staircase, but the structure of the house, man, that's got to be on poured concrete. So I was just going to pour a bit of a hole, and I was going to dig down 2 feet by 2 by 2, basically. As soon as I got 6 inches underneath, it looked like we hit a water main. Water was shooting out like a geyser. Well, it turned out it was all from a spring. But it was completely washing out that foundation base. I could have poured half a truck of concrete, and it's not going to have a solid foundation because the natural circumstances have undermined it. So therefore, if the code says, thou shalt pour 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet worth of concrete to stabilize this staircase base, fine, that's the letter of the law, but it was pointless according to the circumstances. So then you have to look at the heart of the law and it says, I got to do something to spread the load and or divert this water source, which is subterranean and had nothing to do with the code, in order to make sure that the heart of the matter was addressed for the sake of the structure, for the sake of the. So that's where you look at the law that Yahweh said and said, it's not really the letter, it is the letter, but there's not the letter, it's what's going on is this undermining, this toe. And that's where Yeshua said, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, don't commit murder. But I'm telling you, if you've tapped into this spring, this source, which is corroding, compromising, ruining what's going on, you got to knock that off. And then so people take that, turn that into a letter of the law. We got to look at this other stuff going on. Yeah.
It's a restaurant, a food place, or brewery.
A brewery.
Production of making stuff.
So you've just wrecked my whole message. Thanks a lot, man. Huh?
It's actually called fermenting, actually.
Yes, fermenting yeast.
Fermenting yeast. Thank you. I'm just messing with you. Okay, so anyway, this word spelled Shin Yod is the word for gift. Gift, G-I-F-T, to a present. And then basically Tav is the sign of the covenant, like Brad Grumman's And this word is that if it's the end of something else, it means my. And there's something, so I could read this as my covenant, or this suffix yod tav is where the English equivalent suffix is similar, I-T-I-O-U-S, ishus, ... whatever word this is with a ishus or ishusness, whatever word that might be. So it puts the aspect of that word into an adjective sort of essence to denote a character, right? So, Shin Yod Tav is where we get the word S-H-I-T or S-I-T, sit, which is to foundational basis. Shin, or, so to say that's a foundation or the basis of something. Okay, so if you put that all together, you have something about this incorporating into something pure and clean that's exceptional. Nothing else is going to be like this. That this fire, a fire in the head is a brilliant idea. We might put a light bulb in the head, right? And say, oh, I got a great idea. So here's I have an exceptional idea here. And it's going to be this gift as a foundational basis. Yahweh is, the Creator is going to create a gift that is the basis of everything as an exceptional idea. Well, if it's a gift, you have to give it to somebody. So now, if he's going to create this gift, I've got to find somebody to give it to. You know, if you're a single man and you create this beautiful piece of art, you say, I'd like to give this to a lady, but I don't know who to give it to. I don't have one. Now you got to go find one and say, hey, and give that to her, right? I mean, it's that concept. So Yahweh now has to create the love of his heart, which he did, and said, that's Israel. Because this one, of all the peoples on the face of the earth, this one will cherish the matters of my heart and adore me. And when he sees Israel betraying him and going off with seeking after Assyria and Egypt and playing the role of the skank, it's like, oh gosh, it just ruins his whole thing. So what is this gift? Let's look in the same word. Here's another way simply to read this, looking at the individual letters. Bet means in. Resh is head, but as head, there's two letters representing men. The letter Vav, but that's kind of like the common man who would be put to death. So that's what, has anybody ever heard of this notion of Messiah, son of Joseph, versus Messiah, son of David? You've heard that? Do you know where that comes from?
It comes from the time of the king, innit?
The time of what?
The time of the kingship.
But what do you get time of son of Joseph versus son of David? What does that mean? In other words, there's two aspects of a Messiah concept. How do you understand the distinction?
I understand that in the time of Israel, before the kingship came, when they requested a king, they wanted a deliverer to keep them safe and to provide for them and all of that, eventually in the form of what I was saying the other day as a commander-in-chief. And then they requested that king. So they expect that out of their savior, their deliverer, the king. So that was in the form of David. David had provided that.
Okay, so David is this conquering hero king, but what's son of Joseph? What does that mean?
Joseph has, that was during the time that Joseph went into Israel and provided them plenty, isn't it? But then we have the concept of Joseph also being put forward to Joseph in the time of Yeshua and Miriam. I'm not sure about that.
Does anybody else have an understanding of those two? Have you ever heard of it? You've never heard of the concept of Ben Yosef, Ben David? Wow. Let me point this out. Well, before I go on, does anybody else have a notion of understanding that we should address? No? How about you, Rory? I figured you were, I thought you were like plowing through the notes there and trying to, I didn't say anything. Here's the concept. Ben means son, bet noon, right? But also a bet is this thing that's like a housed, it's a container, and Nun is something that jumps out. So you could say, in Frank Seeken's book, he says, well, Nun represents life. In the house, the letter Bet means house. So a son, a Ben, is the life of the house. So if the father has too much time to study his notes and or fall asleep or mow the lawn, and he's like, pfft, it's like, find yourself a wife and have a baby. It's like, whoa, man, you'll never rest again. You'll just, it's the life of the house, right? Obligations, responsibilities, taking time, not your time, but sharing time. So, but also, something is put into enclosure and then leaps out later. What happened to Joseph? They were going to kill him. They threw him into the pit. And then from what I've heard, I think it's in the book of Yashar, that pit was not just, well, just put him in the holding tank for a few minutes while we think of what to do. They tried to kill him. Why? Because it was full of scorpions and snakes, poisonous snakes. They threw him in the pit with dangerous creatures, and oh, gee, guess what? He must have stumbled and fell into the pit. Sorry, Dad, here's the body of your son. But they didn't sting him. So that was another picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, or Daniel in the lion's den, was Joseph in the pit, though we don't necessarily hear it like that. So he leaps out of the pit. Well, they drug him out and gave him to the Midianites, who sold him as a slave in Egypt, where he lay hidden in a bet until circumstances, interpreting the dream and all, yanked him, like the Nun, right out of the dungeon, put him as vizier, which is like prime minister of Egypt. But he was incognito, he was hidden. So here, multiple layers. He was the favored one, and when he got his vision, he was wrapped up in this cloak, and they used that to try to so there's always this bet, Nun, in Egypt, and yet exalted, in the Potiphar's house, thrown into the dungeon, yet exalted. There's this theme, hidden and then exalted. So the Jews, rabbis, sages, see that there's this theme throughout the scriptures at a deeper level than just the Peshat level, that says that there's a Messiah figure who will be obscured and leap out, ta-da, hey, being the Savior. But there's also this picture of the Davidic Ben David, who, remember David, this little rat, the squirt, the guy that we have wants to go take care of the sheep, he's going to be the one anointed by Samuel. And then all the warriors in their tough gear, Goliath, and he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who dares to profane the name of Yahweh Zavot? He's going down. And he couldn't even fit. It's not that he was a little kid. Saul, who was head and shoulders above everybody else, said, wear my armor. And he says, I'm not used to it. It's untried. He didn't say it was too big. He said it's untried. It says, so David was of a man of some stature. He wasn't the little 10-year-old kid by that time. Anyway, he was not a seasoned warrior. So again, he's coming in as the guy incognito in the bet, and yet he knocks down Goliath gets to the position where Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000s. Noon. So David is this picture of the conquering king, spectacular in his achievements, versus Joseph, but they're both Ben, where there's one incognito and then he leaps out to perform this other function. So the rabbis see this distinction of two different models of Messiah, and from what I understand, gleanings over the years, is that they even don't know whether it's one Messiah with two aspects, it'll be like the Joseph model, and it'll be like the David model, or whether it's two Messiahs. But you see, you say, oh yeah, but that's kind of like the Christian theme. It's like, they're not even talking to the Christians. So the Christians don't know that that's what they think, and they're not even going to waste their time talking about it, because the Christians are these loudmouth jerks who lie about things, steal things, and pollute things. So they're not even going to waste their time. So you're never going to get a meeting of the minds to try to hammer this out. So why am I bringing all this up? Because the place of the meeting of the minds, where all this stuff is hammered out so we can see it clearly, is where? The Aleph Bet. Just so you know, the answer to every question I asked is, it's in the Aleph Bet. Here. Remember? I will, Aleph, put myself into camouflage that looks like the man. So here's Ben Yosef, not J, it's Joseph, right? Joseph, who will be put to the weapon, thrown into the tomb, spend the 3 days and the 3 nights. He'll resurrect, he'll rise up, and he's coming back as who? Ben David. As the shining Sheen or Elion, Yahweh El Shaddai, book of Revelation. There's the 2 Messiah figures. Right there in the alphabet. Here, blazing in the sky. Nobody's going to mistake this when this event happens. And when this event happens, like I said, you can't blame the Jews for not recognizing him. It says right here, he's coming in disguise. Because that word baged is where we get the word bagged, or baggy clothing. Put it in a bag. Put your stuff in a grocery bag and you can't see what's there until you open it up. Sleeping bag. The word baged comes right out of this. It's hidden. That's why Yeshua said, who do people say I am? Oh, you're this guy, that guy. Who do you think I am? Oh, you're the son of the living Elohim. Oh, the Ruach must have told you because you couldn't have figured it out on your own. Well, if his disciples couldn't have figured it out, why do we kick the Jews around for not being able to figure it out? He was in disguise. And whatever was going on, they knew something was up. Nicodemon, somebody remind me, I'll get to that later. We heard him as Nicodemus. In Hebrew, it's Nicodemon. He said, we've been watching you. Something really mysterious going on here. Nobody can do the things you do unless Elohim is with him. He didn't say, oh, we think you're the Elohim in the flesh. Nobody can do the things you do unless Elohim is with him. He didn't finish his sentence. Yeshua grabbed that and ran with the conversation, John chapter 3. And if you look close, you never are told why Nicodemus came up to Yeshua to talk to him. So I can ask you the question, what was the subject matter? Why did he hunt him down at night and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? We don't know. Because Yeshua dragged him through the conversation. But I'll show you a secret mystery if you remind me later. The point is, who is this Resh? It's this guy, Ben David. So there's something about the bar compared to Ben. Ben is life of the house, the hidden one that jumps up. And remember, bar is milled to specifications. A bar of metal is refined in exact weight, an exact size, perfect. So bar mitzvah, mitzvot is the commandments. So your bar mitzvah is you've learned the requirements to be a son of the house of the covenant. And so you're tested and proven true, and so you do it. Okay, so what does this mean? In this Resh, which is the Messiah figure, the Messiah figure that the Yahudim are expecting to come in blazing glory, Sheen, this concept of Messiah, first, before anything was created, the epitome of the pinnacle, Aleph, from the eternal realm, somewhere before there was ever a heaven and earth, Bet. That's why Bereshit starts with a Bet. That's the physical material heaven and earth, right? Before there was ever a physical manifestation of the intention, the intention was planned that in this Messiah figure, El Shaddai, the shining fire, the Almighty would yod, construct, build, manufacture, create, establish the covenant. So who is this Messiah? He's the manufactured in Bet form covenant of El Shaddai the Almighty. In Messiah first, El Shaddai would establish, construct the covenant. So he is the construction of the covenant. That's just one way to read it. So that took what, 10, 15 minutes to ponder Bereshit? Have you ever pondered the words in the beginning? Maybe you did, but how far can you go with the English? It's like skipping a rock across the surface of the water versus trying to go deeper and deeper. And there's more you can do with Bereshit. Other people have written books about it, but I'm just trying to show you why the spiral board and what we're doing.
What is Bereshit?
In the beginning. Actually, that's not exactly true. It's translated in the beginning. This is the prefix in. So Rashit means beginning, and remember this is the ishishness, Yod Tav, so really the word Rash means begin. The word Rashon means first. So that phrase, in the beginning, 3 words in English, is 1 word in Hebrew, but I'm trying to show you the way a Hebrew word is constructed. So what I'm doing here by looking at this 1 word is getting very much more detailed about how to read Hebrew. And I'm trying to show you, you can read it by looking at the individual letters, every 2 letters, every 3 letters, and then piecing together concepts, and then taking those concepts and applying them to some New Testament stuff, which is true, and comparing them to some tradition. Bar mitzvah, I don't think that's in the scripture anywhere, but what is it? It's teaching your son till he gets to the position about 13 years old where he learns the mitzvot, the commandments, where he can stand on his own 2 feet and say, you're now a man, a juvenile man, but you're a man who now is responsible autonomously to conduct your own affairs. That's bar mitzvah, which is why the Jews have a celebration. You know, we wait until you're 21 before you can have a drink, 19 before they'll give you a gun and go shoot other people, and maybe 35 or 40 before we can say, well, maybe I can trust you. The Jews and the sons of Ishmael, what, 11, 13, somewhere around that? African nation, sometimes it's 8 or 10 or something. I mean, they put the responsibility on the children way sooner. And I've heard some stories about people who, when they're 8 years old, have to tend to their siblings. Our culture is so watered down. Anyway, somebody had their hand up. Who? Yes?
Rosh there.
Rosh?
Yeah. It's translated as foundation, I see.
It can be foundation. It's also top and pinnacle and head.
So if you, I'm just going a little bit off, like, if you look at that, it could also give you a sense of no time in Bereshit, like in the pinnacle, Elohim made at a point in time, because pinnacle meaning comes to that set point.
Yes.
At the appointed time, so there is like no beginning that is actually being referenced there in a way. It's just a time was appointed, and that time is really not really known time period.
Very, very true. So, the generally accepted that I was taught was this. This meant in the very, 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 very beginning, before there was the heavens and the earth, this is the title of the book. In the beginning, he created the heavens and the earth. Okay, that's the title. Now, how did he go about doing it? He said, there was darkness over the face of the waters, and then he said, let there be light, and that was day 1. Wait a minute, where did the waters come from? Doesn't tell us where the waters came from. So somehow before verse 2, not in the title of verse 1, he put waters and darkness there, because before he made darkness, there was no such thing as darkness. So he had to make darkness as a concept, because in him, who is light, there is no darkness. But the scriptures don't address how did the darkness get there, and where did the waters come from. But I know there are other writings in other books, which are not scripture, where other people have thought or had downloads from demonic entities or prophetic angels or whatever you might say, but other people have come up with explanations. That doesn't make them necessarily right or wrong, but other people have addressed it, because it's clearly, plainly obvious that he doesn't tell us how the darkness got there or where the water came from. So what you just said is that this word Rosh can mean pinnacle, foundation. It refers to a period of time, and all he's telling us is that starting there, the next thing he did was say, let there be light, and go on a sequence. And this is exactly what Tim was addressing earlier in the week, when he was inferring a pre-existing situation where he must have created the entire heavens and the earth. It came to some kind of a cataclysmic end, to the point it was covered with water, and now he's going to recreate it. Well, I've heard before, years ago, from voices, wherever, that some people suggested that there was a previous flood. Where do you get previous flood? Because the world is nothing but water. Well, why should it be nothing but water? Remember, at Noah's flood, he says, I'm not going to flood the world again. How many times has he done it? Once? Maybe twice? Maybe 50 times. But he just said, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do this flooding it with water again. Puts the rainbow in the sky to remind himself that no matter what we do to aggravate him and get him that angry, he's not going to do it with water, but he reserved fire for the next time. Well, here's fire. So when he comes back this time, he's going to nail his enemies with fire. Mem is the letter for water. But see, mem can also represent physical matter based on constructions of oxygen and hydrogen and the way the elements combine, whereas this fire is kind of this plasma energy. So some people regard this as spirit and that as matter. A whole other level of reading this. Anyway, any other comments about Bereshit? Okay, the reason I'm talking about Bereshit is because we wanted to actually get to, somebody asked me to talk about time. So, we were just talking about a reference of time and how you have to, and I wanted to show you the way you break down a word, because I'm not trying to establish or promote a doctrine. I'm trying to help people read, what did Yahweh say? That's all we're doing here. Okay? Whatever you make of it and you want to pick it up and run with a doctrine, don't pin that tail on this donkey. I'm not the, hopefully I'm not the guy responsible for these, whatever might come out of it. But anyway. I'm going to write a phrase. Now, if you know where this comes from, don't say so, please. I'm going to write a phrase which comes out of a verse in the Bible. It's a very important verse. It's a famous verse. I'm not going to tell you where it is because, we were talking about, a few of us men were standing here earlier, just so you know, you're not going to leave anybody out. But as I said, if I tell you what this is from, it's going to drop you into a rut and you won't be able to climb out of it because of what you think it says. I want you to be able to take a fresh mind like a little child who hasn't been indoctrinated, look at the letters, and tell me what you think this means. Just think about it. Just think about it. And before we're done, I'll tell you where this is from. And then you can plug that in. But if I tell you now, it will cripple your mind. It'll impair your agility to play, right? So here's the phrase. Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet. Duplicating that, Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet with the suffix Yod, Mem. And I'll tell you what all this means. I'm not trying to hide anything. And then the last word is Vav, Chet, Zadi, Yod. Now, I'll tell you what the letters are. Nothing secret. No. Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet. Okay, here's Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet. And this is the same letters again, Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet, with a Yod, Mem suffix. And then Vav, Het, Zadi, Yod. There's Het, Zadi, Yod. Now, I'll give you even what these equal. And again, the question is, what does this say? And what does this mean? What message is he trying to tell us by these three words? That's all this is. It's not a trick. Just so you know, it's no trick. Here, this word, and if you remember, if you happen to know where this is from, don't tell anybody. This word spelled Ayin Dalet, I wrote it here, it means witness and testimony. It's the word we translated the other day, until. And when the first day I wrote Ayin Dalet, Ayin Tav is the word translated until the time. Now that phrase happens to be in Daniel 12:4. The archangel Gabriel was talking to Daniel. He said, hide the word and seal the book until the time. So, in that occasion, what the translators have given us is that Ayin Dalet hyphen Ayin Tav literally means until the time. And I told you there's no letter that means the, because that would have been the letter Hey, so it just means until time. So, you were asking about the word time. The word time is spelled Ayin Tav. This is Ayin Dalet. It's not the word for time. But Ayin, this isn't writing so well. Just so you know the way Hebrew works, and because part of trying to figure out his read is to figure out how the language is structured, right? The letter Samic is like that backbone in the ribs. It's an engineered structure. So some of what I'm saying is trying to show you how to engineer Hebrew so that you can understand. And one way to do it, if you don't take a Hebrew class, is simply look at other words and how everybody translates them. So, you see this in the dictionary. Ayin Tav is time. Ayin Tav Hey means right now. So something about the Hey after the word makes it present. So, similarly, the word Zadik is righteous, If you add the hey to Zadik, it means righteousness, which is kind of the expression of righteousness. So the expression of time is right now. This is really the only time we have, is right now. So again, I'm pondering the structure of Hebrew, what this is about. Okay, but this is not that word. I'm just trying to give you a reference. But it's related somehow, because think about this. If the word ayin dalet means until, what does until mean? It means it's a progress of time, right? Something will be an existing condition, sustained until something else happens. So this word until is moving a direction, and then it comes to some kind of a block, in which case it changes, right? Until is a concept of modification having hit a threshold, right? Which is a door. Remember, a door is a threshold. A fork in the road, a transition of some sort. So this is talking about some type of transition. But it's referring to a period of time, even though the word time is not that. So it's a concept of happening. Now remember, we said the letter mem is a womb where something incubates and develops until it's the day to give birth. You're in this room until you learn a certain thing, and then you can go to the next class. You're in here until you've finished eating your vegetables, and then you can go outside and play. It's the same concept. Mem embodies that concept. But mem, if you look at the dictionary, it's a prefix letter, which means where you're at. It also means away from, which means I used to be there, and now I'm over here. So if I used to live in Calgary and now I live in Edmonton, I am mem Calgary. But it might mean I used to be a Buddhist and now I'm a Hindu and I'm against Buddhism. So you could say I'm mem Buddhism. Okay, what I'm saying, it doesn't mean you're contrary to, but it might mean that. In other words, something has changed. Well, here's another little take on things. The concept of crossing over, jumping over the threshold, is exactly what the word Pesach means. Pe, Samik, Het is the word Pesach. And I remember I write the Het as a CH, so Pesach, because of the guttural sound. The concept of jumping over a threshold is the word Pesach, or to be lamed where you can't jump is also the word Pesach. So something about this, and that word Pesach, or jumping over, to cross over, is the word ayin bet resh, also a synonym, which means Hebrew. Hebrew is the word aver, which means to cross over something. The word, just to invoke, Nibiru, that planet, Nibiru, is a word that came from Assyria or Sumeria from ancient times. It was drawn as a picture of these wings and orb, wings over here. This is a Persian picture also, and then it has a person standing here with a beard, like some kind of a sort of deity figure. And they say, well, that's a god riding a planet, or that's like this planet that came into our solar system and caused all sorts of havoc, which is why they think this Nibiru guy is a chariot of the gods. That's where that concept came from. But it literally means Nibiru is where we get the word neighbor, N-E-I-G-H-B-O-R, which is the guy on the other side of the property line. In other words, here's the property line, we're here, he's there. It's somebody coming into our neighborhood. It's the exact same word as Mishkan, which is the tabernacle, which is Shekinah, or Sheken, where he neighbors or dwells with us, which is where we get the word tavern, the local watering hole, or taverno, or tabernacle. It's all the same word. I'm trying to show you a whole bunch of synonymous words having to do with this concept, because what we're trying to find is, what do these three words mean? Okay? And so, mem as a prefix can mean a tool, or an instrument, or a place, or the person who is engaged in the activity of doing that, whereas nun, very similar to mem, is doing it. Or the carpenter is the one who's doing the carpentry work with the wood. So here, if let me show you one other thing. Here's mem vav ayin. If you look at ayin dalet with this word, it means jewel, witness, testimony, the word until or booty. As a witness. If you stick a vav between the ayin and dalet, you get od, which means repeatedly and forcefully. In other words, if you have a witness that says, yeah, there's some evidence there, or if Yahweh says, these are my testimonies, moed, this is the word moed, this is the word we know as appointed time or festival. What we're doing here is a moed. But if you put, instead of ayin dalet, if I were to stick a vav in between here, that's the word translated repeatedly and forcefully. It's like, no, you really, really better keep this appointed time. It's very important. So to put a vav in the middle is kind of like putting an exclamation point here. But there is no vav in this word. I'm just showing you that if you can stick a vav in it and makes it nailed, important, like I was saying to these guys earlier, if I have a stick that I'm going to hit you with, like a switch, but if I stick a nail in it, now it's a weapon. Vav is a nail. We're sticking a nail in this wood, something repeatedly and forcefully. And Yahweh said, he's told us repeatedly and forcefully. I'm quoting from another verse, but just to say, that's another thing. But that's not here right now. What does this word mean? The place of the witness, or the instrument of his jewels. The booty is that which is stolen. Moed is his appointed times, and they were stolen, they were ripped off, they were taken away by the authority of politics and religion, church and state, that removed them, and we're now taking them back, right? So the question is, what does this mean? This is singular, this is plural, and here's this word, which is, here's the fence, here's a sprout, the zadi. Yod is a suffix, can mean my, not necessarily, because this could be a three-letter word, but if it's a two-letter word with a yod, that means my. This, as a vav, which, remember, it's the word for and, because it's a nail that which it took, which attaches. It can mean and, but it can also mean but, or however, which is a contrast. In other words, this word and does the act of bonding this side to that side. So the vav, you could say, is a nail, or like a screw, which joins these two things together. But I'll tell you the definition of this word here is arrow. You look up in the dictionary and it means arrow, which is where you get the word Sagittarius or sagittal, which means if you have an angle, like in mathematics, and you bisect that angle, so this shape of a bisected angle, which is an arrow, is that word. Chetzadi, chatz. This would be chatzi, my arrow. So as it also means then to bisect, which is to say one half, but it also means to partition or put a wall in a room. If we were to say, okay, you got these pillars, let's put a curtain up here. We're partitioning that side from this side. That's this word. We're making a distinction between two sides, separating, bisecting an angle. Okay, so what we have here is this word moed, which is one of the appointed times. We have moedim, which is to make those appointed times plural, but yet this word means until, so this is a tool or an instrument determining a length of time about a witness or a testimony, and this is to pluralize it, and this means to cut in half or to somehow pierce or partition or bisect, and it has something to do with his arrow. Or here's another clue, is that now there's another way to look into the Hebrew words, to decipher. I'm trying to show you how to cipher, right? I know, I told you before that pei zadi means open mouth. Pei is a mouth, zadi is a sprout. If the mouth were to sprout and become flowery, your mouth is open and you're speaking, right? That word pei zadi literally means open mouth. That's these two words. Yeshua went up to a mountain, he sat down, opened his mouth, and taught them the Beatitudes. That's pei zadi. The word ayin zadi is open eyes. It's actually the word for wood, as in tree wood, as in a piece of lumber, to lignify, like petrify is turned to stone, this is to turn to wood, but it also means to take counsel, which is to have your eyes opened. So again, the same word means to have your eyes opened or to close your eyes like wood, but if pei zadi means open mouth, ayin zadi, meaning opening your eyes, Kuf is a picture of a shackle, as it were, though it's the monkey's arm in the back of the head. But Kuf Zadi means to awake, which is to say your shackles are open and you come out of your coma. Then Het Zadi, Het is a fence, so Het Zadi must mean somehow opening of a fence, which is to say if the Het, like I was saying the other day, is this fence like the Mishkan, and the Kuf is like the lid on the Mishkan, and the word spelled Het Kuf is chok, or commandment, then somehow if we keep his commandments, maybe, it opens up his treasure box, like the arrow piercing the lock on the locked treasure box and opening up the stuff that's in his Het, which also represents the fence of the Mishkan, or like the kingdom, the castle, the prison, some enclosure, which is the treasure is kept away. The word for treasure, if you look up in the Hebrew, is not just segula, my precious treasure, but look in the dictionary. It's what is a treasure? I mean, I've done this exercise, right? What is a treasure? Something you hide and protect. Where do you put the treasure? Or what is a treasury? A place you put something you want to hide and protect. A treasure is something you hide. A treasury is a place you put something you want to hide, but it doesn't tell you anything more than that. Something valuable is something you want to hide. You understand how limited the understanding there is? But if you put it into Het Kuf, you say, okay, Yahweh's stuff. Remember, the Kuf is also a picture of the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, his authorized presence. Okay, Yahweh being present with his people, present, the Shekinah glory, him encamping. Remember, Kuma, arise, make your enemies flee. Shuvah, abide tranquilly. Both of those are in the picture of the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, which is the letter Kuf. So the Kuf over the Het is his abiding presence over the camp, which is a picture of the lid and the treasure box. Okay, if that's the Het, which gets opened here, then what is it? Now here, I'm going to throw this over to you guys, because I'm not trying to drive this. I'm trying to show you the elements so that you can tell me what this phrase means. And after we do this, notice the smell is different than what it was earlier. Smell in the air of what she's baking. After we do this a little bit, I will show you what this means and where it comes from in Scripture. Okay, just a little bit in front of us. What does this mean? The place or the tool or the instrument of the witness. Emphatically, very important, something about the appointed times, which we think of as festivals, but they are, see, Yod Mem, like Elohim, can mean plural, but it also means the highest and greatest. Elohim can mean plural, like it's called the royal we, and that's not the Louvre that the king uses. That's a joke. The royal we. Anyway, the royal we says, if you ask a king, what do you want for dinner? We shall have the steak and eggs, or, he talks of himself in the plural because he's above the common man. The same concept for Elohim to be plural with a Yod Mem doesn't mean there's many gods talking and conferring together. That's one take on the matter. So in Genesis, where it says, let us make man, there's one train of thought that says he's talking in the royal we plural, just so you know. So if this Moedim means the greatest of the testimonies, or the plural of the appointed times, either way, this is now bisecting or partitioning or cutting them, whether it's a half or 1/3, 2/3, or whatever it might be. So, think. What does this mean? This is out of Scripture. So this phrase, Moed, Moedim, Vechatzi. So we discussed it. So Tim, you're out of this conversation for the moment. Can anybody just play with it? You can't, like I said, the only thing we don't want to do in this sandbox is pick up the blocks with letters on them and throw them at your siblings. Moed, Moedim, Vechatzi. Okay, tell you what, instead of me reading, somebody else put this into your words. I just said it a half a dozen times, so again, I'm not trying to insult or make anybody look like a fool, but just play with it, like little kids playing. Yes, Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet. Like charades almost, or something. Mem, Vav, Ayin, Dalet with a Yod Mem ending.
So
Here, let me show you one other thing. I just saw this here. Remember how I broke things into pieces? This word die, dalit yod, you know the song, die, die, yenu. They actually sing it at Pesach. And then they say, this is the, I don't know if anybody's not heard the song, but this is what they say. Had he only taken us out of Egypt and freed us from the Pharaoh, that would have been sufficient. Dayenu, sufficient is die. Enu, putting nun vav at the end, means us. It would have been good enough for us if he'd only done that. But he also took us out and called us his beloved treasure. And if that wasn't enough, he also told us the mysteries of the universe and gave us the 10 Commandments. And if that wasn't enough, he also said, I will be your Elohim. And if that wasn't enough, he also said it would be for eternity. I mean, that whole song was step by step. If it wasn't enough, it would have been sufficient. But he also, and he also, and he also. And if you listen to that song, it's blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing. He just poured out. But it would have been sufficient. So this word die, when your life has been sufficient, what do you do in English? You die. I've had enough. How I made this connection, there's this movie called Ushfazim, which means invited or uninvited guest that happened to show up. And at one point, the man's talking, the lady goes, die, die. I've heard enough, no, too many words. We're not there yet, by the way, just so you know. We're not at too many words yet. I'm still going to be, that's a joke, come on. Anyway, that's the word die, which means sufficient. So if this means until, and if this is sufficient, then the other way to read this is that this is going to persist until there's a sufficiency. So we could read this as plural, or greatly, or sufficiency of this progression. So we're talking about this event, a transitional event, okay? So I've tried to show you half a dozen different ways that a transitional event, such as the word Hebrew and the word Pesach, is about what this subject matter is.
It's going to be something that's hidden until the time comes that it should be revealed.
Can people hear? She's saying something is obviously, as you perceive, something should be hidden until a transitional event when something else then is going to happen. And what's the nature of that other thing?
The nature of
What happens at the transition? I showed dots turning to dashes.
to be revealed.
The what?
Revealed.
What is revealed?
I don't know.
Well, just to play, if this and this says my arrow. So either, I would think that either his arrow is going to be that event, shooting the arrow that causes the distinction, or something about his arrow is what's going to be revealed, perhaps, right? And again, just so you know, I have an idea, and then when we were talking about it with a few men standing here, another idea came up, and I have this other idea, which we didn't mention earlier, but that doesn't mean that I'm trying to tell you what this means. I'm suggesting that you guys who don't see, because you're illiterate, that's a whole nother teaching which we could get into later if you want, remind me and we'll do that, but because you're illiterate, you might see something which I don't see. Yes? Yes? Sigrid, you had a point?
Well, I've been drifting off here and there, so I didn't catch everything you said, but when I look at it, maybe the place where,
That's a mem.
the place where people choose to ornament themselves
Ein dalet is to ornament with jewelry, or literally ornament, necklace, it's all the same thing.
with these things,
His testimonies. Okay, the Moedim is to ornament. We have ornamented ourselves with his colors, blue, purple, red, white, with his words, Hebrew, with his festivals, the Moedim, with his Shabbat, with his name. We're doing that. We're ornamenting ourselves with his. So that's a place where his people, Mem, also represents people, right? So we as his people are ornamenting ourselves with his stuff. Okay, then.
I will multiply them.
He's going to like supplement or light the fire and get it boiling, or do something to augment or to, as a catalyst. Okay, because you're doing that, I'm going to put something else in and really get it going. Okay.
You will be like my arrow,
You will be like my arrow.
and I will separate you from those that do not choose my ways. Like I will separate you, because it also means to divide, to separate.
That's right.
So he's going to
Okay.
set us apart from
You,
those that do not choose them. He's gonna
okay, now I would not disagree with that, but that wasn't my words. Just so you see what's going on here, each one of you have a very fair and valuable, valid perspective worth hearing. which isn't me telling you, right? That's just you. I'm just trying to show you how to read, and now she just read this phrase. But there's other ways to read the phrase, as we talked about. You know, there's a positive, there's a negative, there's sometimes 10 different things that are different aspects, like a faceted diamond. Okay, you had something? Huh?
It'll grow.
Something will grow. What grows?
His testimony?
The testimonies might develop and sprout. Remember now, the Zodi, I've equated in the pattern, equated the Zodi to the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Well, it was in the place of the Kadosh Kodashim, but in the Ark of the Covenant, in the Kadosh Kodashim, was Aaron's rod that sprouted. One day there was 12 rods, all of which were just dried sticks. The next morning it had not just a little twig sprout, but sprout and fruit and blossom. I mean, the whole thing had a whole progression all at once. So what I'm saying that's a picture of, perhaps, is that, remember I said everything is held in abeyance, like in a dam, like in a bank account, and once it opens, you got the whole thing that had been held up for generations, that all the generations could have shared in, but because they didn't, they took their allotment and stuck it in this trust fund, and then when the generation comes by, suddenly Yahweh's going to open up and say, you got the whole thing. So you get the sprout of the twig, you get the leaves, you got the blossoms, and you get the fruit, and you get the fragrance, and it's like, it's a model, right?
Something to do with inheriting the kingdom of God.
Inheriting the kingdom of Elohim. So now, we talked about Nicodemus. Let me just reference this. I've always heard his name as Nicodemus, but when you have a word like Jesus or Zeus, US is not an evil thing. It's simply Greek syntax, grammar of masculine singular. That's all, masculine singular. So Nicodemus is a Greek version of his name, masculine singular. Why does the ISR version, the Hallelujah Scriptures, call him Nicodemon? How would you spell Nicodemon? Phonetically, to cut to the chase, would be Nun, N-Q-D-Y-M-N. Nicodemon. Okay, I'll just tell you, the word Nun Kuf Dalet is where we get the word nicked. If I hit the table and put little marks in it, I've nicked it. That's what the word means. It means to punch with dots. Yeshua's body was nakad, pierced and perforated with holes. If I look at Dalet Yod, die, that means enough, stop. If I look at Mem Nun, that's like in the alphabet, it means, it's the word for manna, means, what? Where'd this come from? It's questioning, it's to count. So the word Nicodemon means something about pierced and perforated enough, and then questioning what's going on or where, and he comes saying, we think you come from Elohim. We're sure you come from Elohim. What did this disciple say when he rose from dead? Is it now you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? If Nicodemon knew that there was a phantom Ben David, Ben Yosef Messiah that was expected to arrive. And he says, hey, if you come from Elohim, maybe you could tell us. Or maybe you're the guy, or you're somebody special. We know that, where did you come from, Memnoon? Is this the time? If we waited long enough, die, Nikad, Nick, what does that got to do with it? Why these dots? Ah, the jots and tittles. You look back at where Jacob had been essentially self-imposed banishment, separated from his brother for so many years, and they were finally going to meet. An occasion of bridging this expanse. And Jacob hears that Esau is coming with over 400 armed to the teeth warriors, and he's going to kill him. He's threatened to kill him for his whole life, and this is it. He's dead. So he separates, Jacob does, the children from Leah, the children from Rachel. And he's just hoping. And he's bowing and he's sending gifts to him. And Esau runs up and he falls on his neck and kisses him, it says in the text. But the word kissed has dots above it. And the rabbis say, well, he really wanted to bite him, but his heart was moved and he kissed him instead. Okay, let's suppose that's true. There's one other place where there's dots. There's actually two other places. One is simply the Aleph Tav with two dots. But the other place with dots is Deuteronomy 29:28. Now here's a mystery. It says, Moshe speaking to, this is Deuteronomy 28, right near the end, almost Moshe's death. He's recapping the whole Torah to him, and he says, the time is going to come when we, the people of Israel, turn our back on Yahweh, we profane his stuff, and we're kicked out and dispersed. And the people at that time will say, why is it that we're kicked out of the land and we're dispersed, sent away? And that word sent away is shalach. But the letter lamed is large. It's one of those jots and tittles. It's a large lamed. Remember, the word lamed means teach and learn. We are dispersed, cast out, divorced, projected, shot like an arrow. Literally, that means to shoot an arrow or a missile and send it far away, as we are to this day. And then the next verse says, that which is unknown, hidden, is Yahweh's business. It says, unto Yahweh. But that which is revealed, manifest, not in a chet, but open for us, that which has been revealed is lenu velebenu. It says, is for us and our children. That's us. For them and us. And that word has dots above it. To keep all the words of this Torah forever. Well, that's us now. But why is there dots above the word lenu velebenu? Those words are nikud. They're dots. So if nekadamon was directly in John chapter 3 referencing that verse, he's saying, have we been kicked out of the land long enough? Of course, they're standing there in the land, but they're occupied by Romans. And before that, Greeks, and before that, Persians, and before that, Babylonians, and before that, Assyrians and Egyptians. It's like, come on, is it enough? Dayenu, have we suffered and been pierced enough? Did you come to give us back the kingdom? And Yeshua says, my kingdom's not of this world. It's like, what? And he says, how do you get born again? It says, what? And he says, are you not the great teacher of Israel? You, Nikadamon, are you not the great teacher? Now, what form of what letter would you use to represent the great teacher or the great teaching? Lamed? And how about a large lamed? There's a large lamed right there in that verse. And underneath the large lamed in Stone's edition, it's not in the Chumash, it's on two different pages, but in Stone's tradition Tanakh here, you open it up, and right there at the bottom of the page, you can see it, I'll show you, is an enlarged lamed with dots underneath it. Because underneath it is, they're above the word lenu velebenu. Nikadamon is the teacher of us and our children to regard the words of this Torah forever. In the fact that we didn't is why we got kicked out. So what is he telling him? If you want to regain the kingdom, go back and look at what he said in Deuteronomy 29, the way to get the kingdom back, like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. Oh, you could have gone home anytime. Just click your heels together and say, I want to go home. Oh, you could have gone home anytime. Just say, I'm going to keep the words of the Torah. We could have got the kingdom back. But right after Yeshua's here, they gave us Christianity and then Islam and rabbinical Judaism, and we still lost the kingdom until when? Until the time we can get the kingdom back. So what is this talking about? What did you say? The time to get the kingdom back? And how do we do it? What is the secret formula of how do we get the kingdom back? Now, anybody else have something they want to throw in? Huh? Where do you get that here? Do all the words of the law, but yet the book of the law being nailed to the cross, as we were told, versus the book of the covenant, that invokes another thing. So let's stay here with these words. That's another thing. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm saying that's a different conversation with different ramifications. But in the interest of time, the scent has changed yet again, and so I think we're going to stop pretty soon. But I'm trying to get this to a resolution so you can appreciate it. But what do you get out of these three words? So don't invoke other scriptures yet. You can prove it by invoking other scriptures. But for the sake of this study, I'm trying to, we're disbanding. Half the people have gone. I'm trying to give you what I can so that you can do this at home. I'm trying to show you, stay on track with these three words, suck everything out of them you can. Then I'll show you what other people say, the other translators. But I'm suggesting that whatever you tell me right now that you see is more accurate and more valuable than any translation. And as soon as I show you the other translation, it will pollute your mind. So I want you to be able to take this and make it your own before it gets polluted. That's all I'm trying to do. What do you see about his instructions in here? Now, for what it's worth, if the chet represents the Mishkan, the fence, it's his stuff, so that would include his instructions, I would say. But what do you see specifically in these words and letters? And I'm asking you as illiterate. I see something you don't because I'm more literate now. But when I was illiterate, I saw things differently than perhaps now. So I'm trying to take advantage of your illiteracy, specifically being illiterate. There's of great value in the ignorance of youth, you might say. Yes?
I got, when those who choose to get together for me.
Okay, hang on. When those who choose. What he just did was say the instrument or the occasion, the place of until, can otherwise be encapsulated in the English word when. Did you see what he just did? Now, you won't necessarily find moed as when. You might, I'd have to look it up. But what he just did is say the occasion at the threshold of until is actually when. Do you see what he did? Okay, so you're saying when?
Choose to get together for me.
When you choose to assemble, get together regarding the stuff of my hands. When you choose, the dalet is a choice. Remember, so dalet is a door, so he's putting in the word choose. So when you choose to assemble, right? A moed is a commanded assembly. To get together regarding the stuff of my hand, which is, you could say my instructions. You could pull that in from what you're saying then.
Step out and go and show and tell my stuff that they chose to do.
Show and tell my stuff.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get that from?
Well, they're in the fence. They go out of the fence back to Moedim.
Okay, so what, I'm just trying to paraphrase here. So instead of being enclosed in a fence, trapped as it were in this box, he's saying the box opens, like the eye opens, like the mouth opens. So break open the box and share my stuff with everybody else that wants it. Share the treasure. As I said before, if I saw the Mishkan fence as the box and the kuf over the top like a treasure box, then the opening of that would be, you might say, is like shooting an arrow into the lock, or taking, in the Wild West, you shoot the gun and it blows the lock apart so you can open up and take the loot, right? Same type of picture. So he's saying, bust open the lock, which is holding the fence, the treasure box closed, so we can take the stuff of Yahweh that's inside, which is his instructions, commandments, his treasures, his jewelry, his witnesses and testimonies, and share it. Just like to invoke a pagan custom on Halloween, kids knock on the door and you open up and just toss out the candy. So toss out the words. That's a picture. Anybody else have a different picture? Bill? Oh, lost. Can anybody help you understand? No, I'm saying, is there anything that someone can say to help you find your bearings from what are you seeing or not seeing that needs to be addressed?
I don't understand the language. Like the first letter, because I haven't been in class.
Okay.
The first letter, I don't quite understand what's the first letter.
It's the letter mem. It means water and it means a place.
And it vibrates and moves and acts.
Right. It's chaotic. See this turbulence? If I finish the picture, because this is a glyph, right? This is like the crushing wave action, and this is the undertow of the wave. So it's just this event. It's a place. It's some turbulent action where something is going to be put into, but it's also like water, like a woman's womb nurturing a baby. It's a place where a seed is put in and it grows and develops. That's water. But you could look at land, a garden bed, as being a mem, even though it's not water. You mean you water it, but a mem is a garden bed where you bury the seed, it's hidden, it puts out roots, and it starts to grow until it pops out. So the idea of it popping out is literally the meaning of the letter nun, and mem is the environment, whether it's a womb or a garden or water, where it's growing and developing. So this engaging action of mem nun, like Nekadamon, Israel was banished until some kind of occasion of timing or circumstance when it can break out of its shackles of confinement and get the kingdom back. That's why I invoked the Kadamon, to show you this is all related subject matter. Does that clarify? I hope, maybe. Okay, yes?
You write, like you've done with these letters, can you write water under that word and what that second letter is?
Okay, this is water, this is nail, this is eye, and this is door. Same word, but this means my, or it's also hand. My hand, it also means power and strength. It's like, this is my hand right here, and this is water again. And this is fence, as I wrote, and this is sprout, and that's my, and this is and or but.
Okay, so the question is, what is it that sprouts
What is it that sprouts
or grows?
or grows? Something growing inside the fence? Well, that's a picture of a garden right there. A fenced area is a garden that gets watered. A fenced area is a garden where something gets watered and then it sprouts. Okay, there's another picture there. Okay, so if this is Yahweh's garden, okay, my garden, right. Okay, here, this is inside my garden, something will sprout. Well, what sprouts? The seed. Okay, as I said before, that everything's in sequence, so Kaf Lamed is teach and learn the words of my words of the Torah, which will Mem Nun develop and sprout in my garden.
His garden is the people that have chosen to assemble in his garden.
So this is a picture of his garden, us here this week.
And we're growing, we're learning.
We're growing and developing and learning and sprouting. So, which happens to be the month of Aviv, the greening, right? So here, just if you look at Aleph, Bet, Yod, Bet, the month of Aviv, Bet is a gateway or an entrance. Aleph Bet is a sprout. It's also the word Ab, which is father, but look in the dictionary, it's a sprout, it's verdure, it's be invigorated, it's youth, it's the greening of the occasion. So exactly what you just read in the word Chatzi is the same as the word Aviv. You see that, which has to do with Pesach, which is this, which is you will be left dormant as in winter. Now, interestingly enough, the word Zaphon is translated as north, on the sides of the north, but it's also the word hidden, which is also the word for winter, which is to lay dormant until the springtime of Aviv. So the secret being revealed is the same exact word as north. He sent them to the north, or into the north country, is to be like winter, where the life is unnoticed, unrecognized. Huh? Well, the northern kingdom was banished to the northeast, actually. So what I'm saying is that now, this is like I was trying to say, like playing that game of concentration where you got all the cards and you recognize, or crazy eights. And someone when I talk, you'll see I mentioned that. Crazy eights is, if somebody puts down a 4 of clubs, you can either play a clubs or a 4. And if you want to change it up, you'll lay down an 8, and then you can play down anything. But you're trying to either match suit or match number. That's the game. So here you can either match spelling of word or concept as a synonym. And you start making all these connections and the whole scripture opens up. It's a fantastic game. Yes, you were raising your hand?
Well, I'm just seeing something like when you look through the door, you'll nail something.
Okay, when you look through this particular door, and one of the first things we talked about, how Yeshua claimed to be the door, right? That's a door. And if that's the Messiah, who first came as Ben Yosef, who would be put to the weapon and the tomb, and then sprout and come back, then if you don't recognize that Yeshua is that door, you're going to miss one whole thing. Sorry, brother Yehuda, you've been lied to as much as the Christians and Islam has been lied to.
But you've got, in that sentence, you've also got 2 doors in that sentence.
There's this door here, and there's this door here. But again, now you have to be careful. Is there 2 doors? There might be. I'm not saying there's not. Is it this becoming this? Now, this is a typical, I'm showing you a typical Hebrew syntax. When you shema what I told you to shema. So what you'll see when you really shema, so you'll see the word shin mem ayin, and then another version, like Shabbat, Shabbaton. Okay, when he says, when you shomer what I told you to shomer, you'll see 2 versions of the word shomer, a smaller version and an elaborated version. And there's different spellings the way they do that. So what I'm saying is when you truly hearken, well, we don't in English say when you hear, it'll say when you truly hear. Or we don't say when you guard, he'll say somebody mentioned this word the other day. It's when you either diligently regard or when you, word escapes me. Somebody just had mentioned it. But when you really, that's what he's saying. So is it 2, or when he says when you truly regard the witness. Just saying. There's a couple different ways to regard this.
Or until that door's shut.
The door will be shut until.
And they've gone in and assembled, they've gone through the door and assembled.
Okay, there's a certain, even though you might say, even though you regard the Messiah, hey, that almost looks like Christianity, right? There's a certain people who regard the door, but they're going to be left out until they regard the Moedim,
Yeah.
maybe. Or there's a certain people who regard the Moed, like the Jews, and until they regard understanding Yeshua said, I'm the door, and that he's not that louse, that jerk, that one that we want to profane and don't mention his name, which is one reason why they call them Yeshua. It's an acronym, Yod Shin Vav Ayin, that says, may his name be cursed and lost forever. Anyway, they both, Yehuda and the Christians, both have something to open their eyes to. And I'm not leaving the sons of Ishmael and Esau out of this, because they're part of the sons of Abraham. That's why I keep invoking the third element. But that's another story. Let's proceed. That's a yod, yes. A working hand. My hand grasps this. It's like an excavator bucket. It's the hand that works and constructs. And it means it means power and strength. It means portion or monument.
And it means
So when
to
you
give.
grab my appointed times and my seasons or festivals,
When you grab the things that I appointed as your treasure, because they're my treasure, because they're the times and festivals and seasons, because this word Moedim is also translated as seasons. It's translated as seasons in Genesis 1 on day 4. Sun, moon, stars put in the sky for seasons. It's translated also as festivals, but it's actually appointed times. So here, let me show you a picture that this invokes in the study, is that the menorah is designed to have 6 branches in one. Well, those branches are appointed as lights when they're lit. Each branch is an appointed principality, jurisdiction, like the 7 kahalim, the assemblies, not churches, the assemblies can be regarded as cities or houses of believers or periods of time, dispensations if you were, but he arranged these 7 patterns. So that could be what he's saying. Huh?
How many cities of sanctuary were there?
Well, there was, I think they established 2, and then they were allowed to have a total of 6 or 6 more. I forget the exact number. Maybe somebody can, I don't think it was, but it would have been nice. But anyway, yes?
This is a 3-dimensional or more puzzle.
Yes.
You know how you used to make 3-dimensional puzzles when you were a kid?
Yep.
Maybe you didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, this is multidimensional. Everything in Hebrew is multidimensional. Just so you know, I'm trying to give you the experience as a real thing, not just give you another class of hearing things and writing things down. You are tasting the food. This is tasting. You're doing the event of translating Hebrew. You are translating Hebrew here.
I keep reading that, and I keep ending up inside the fence. I used your bisected arrow from the other word to get out, but I can't see in those 3 words, I don't see getting out.
Okay.
Back in my garden,
So
where
we're
you're
born
growing enough.
we're born of water, he's nailed to the cross, he leaves us with his spirit, he gives us eyes to see, the door to go through. That's one aspect of who we become in accepting his truth. And now we move into expansion as we embrace his, we have a choice as we assemble as Moedims, and you put what we've learned into action, and,
Sprouting what we've learned within the Chet.
right, so we come into a season, a Moedim, we're in the fence, kind of in the, we're not tabernacle, but we're gathered,
Nailed down.
Are we gathered inside the fence or out?
we're within the tent,
Let me give you one other thing. Remember I told you Zadi Yod Vav Nun, the word Zion? I just noticed, here's a Zadi Yod. That's my commandment. Now that might, Zadi Vav is actually precept, but remember Zadi Yod is a ship, but also he says, I will command the blessing, live forever. That's in Psalms, I think it's 103 or 110. It's on the back of the card. Yahweh commands the blessing, Chaim et olam, live forever. So this Zadi Yod is I will command. So something is going to happen where Yahweh himself, now remember, this goes back to Ezekiel 36:23, I will make my Shem HaKadol Gadosh. When you guys make my Shem Kadosh in the ayin, in the eyes of the understanding of the goyim amongst whom you've been scattered. And so I was suggesting a couple days ago that he's waiting for us, though we've been told we're waiting for him. We're sitting here waiting for the rapture bus, and it's like, gosh, come on, I'm getting older and older. I'm not waiting for a bullet or an injection or something, or to have a heart attack. Why don't you do something? Wait a minute, he's been waiting for us to do what? And when we do that thing, which is to make his Shem HaGadol, his great name, Kadosh, which is pure and clean, in the ayin, the understanding of the goyim. In other words, we're now supposed to go out, as I think you said earlier, and show the world his treasures. So in other words, it's like, hey, wait a minute, these are his treasures. We don't want to hide them. No, these are seeds of life. There's something about his treasures which are seeds of life. And the Kohen, Leolam, was supposed to show the world the seeds of life. So this notion, hide his treasures so that we can have it for ourselves, is contrary to this other picture. And that's right. You want to buy some bad life?
No, we shouldn't be doing that. We should be able to leave the bus stop, go out there and say, hey, come here, look.
So if this is a chet, the what? It is what evangelizing is about. But look at this. I'm giving it some dimension, but look at this. This chet means what's behind the fence. The Zadi Yod is behind the fence. This might be saying, this is just what I'm saying here, is that something has been restrained from us. What? Him commanding the empowerment of his stuff to work. So in other words, for the last 2,000 years, why is it that it looks like the prayers haven't worked? Well, they worked to some degree. He did say, I will be, greetings, thank you for coming. I will be a little bit of a refuge for the people that I've scattered around the world. But we don't want a little bit of a refuge like a pup tent that can be blown over in the wind. He said, my stuff will turn into Gidolim, which is massive towers of strength that cannot be gotten to. He said it would be out of reach, insurmountable heights. This, I'm seeing Zadi Yod, is that he will command that that this tower of insurmountable height of protection, he said, if only they would have grabbed a hold of my moose. Remember we talked about that the first day, and you see the moose like the antlers like the castle walls. He says, like Dorothy, just click your heels together, say you want to go home. Just like the guy, the prodigal son, the word pig means one who returns. Gee, I wish I could eat the food of the pig. Hey, I wish I could eat the food of one who returns. I could go home and eat the food of one who returns at my Father's table. It's all the same story. We could have gone home any time. It's not up to him. It's up to us. Just say, I want to go home and eat the food at my Father's table. What's on the Father's banqueting table? So you see these pictures of this long banqueting table, nicely set with linen and crystal and silverware. And it's like, the alphabet is Abba's banqueting table. These are the words. It's not some meal of vegetables and pot roast. It might be something else, but what I'm saying is, this is his banqueting table. Can you taste it? Can you smell it? Can you start to get you can see it. This is Abba's banqueting table. Let's eat the food of one who returns. So what else is this saying? Does this tell us how we get there? And then, remember, it's been off limits. It's been behind the chet. But once we break into Abba's garden, he will command the blessing to happen in power and strength. That's the Yod. The Yod is like this pillar of, like Washington, D.C. You know, the Washington Monument, that's a Yod. It's an arm, it's a foreleg. It's not just a hand, it's not just an excavator bucket. Look in the dictionary, it's all these things that represent. So George Washington, the first president, you know, it's all these other matters. So what I'm saying is that you read these other things, and somebody else had noticed. Yes, Bill.
I'm kind of looking at the very last one there, the very last word there, and I'm thinking, okay, waters being people. I'm thinking that's actually I read it the very last word.
I'm just pointing, you said waters being people, and then I'm just pointing so people can say, well, why would he say waters are people? I'm pointing at that, and then you look at the last word with the head, and so go on.
So I'm looking at the first letter there, and the last word is waters, and I'm looking at them as being people.
Oh, this is the word vav, which is and, or nail, something attaching.
Okay.
That's why I'm pointing to clarify, making sure everybody's on the right track.
I think he's thinking
But that would be the letter mem.
That'd be the letter, yeah.
But Vav, remember, Vav can mean Messiah ben Yosef, the hidden one who later jumps out like Ben, right?
The other letter, the fence, I was thinking of that similar to people beating in the fence, people being surrounded by the hedge.
Certainly.
And then the other letter, the sprout,
Well, they will sprout back to life. The stuff inside his... Remember, he put in the most set-apart place the tree of life. And then lest Adam and Hua put their hand to it and eat it and live forever, which is a picture of Zadi, he kicked them out of the garden and put two flaming angels there saying, you can't get back in. So he put the tree of life, so the letter Zadi can represent the tree of life also. He put the tree of life behind the fence because of our sin, and then he provided us Moedim as a way to, you might say, a way to get some kind of access back to the element or the benefits of the tree of life. The one's a physical one, and the other's a, you might say, a more of a ethereal, spiritual interpretation. Yes, and then Sue.
There's a water and a, what's the one that's the Y thing?
Nail, or it means and or but.
Just what does it mean up on the top? Yeah, what is
Well, it means like the man who was put to the weapon
watered the man, he watered the man,
watered the man.
man. There's three, there's patterns. There's a watered the man.
The man is watered with the testimony. Maybe?
Yeah, but it's one there, and one there. 3 times.
There's 3 men's, or that you could even say, well, that's kind of a 666 because there's 3 numbers that are 6. If somebody wanted to go there, what? Huh?
The last letter of that word,
That's a yod.
no, the last letter of the second word is the water.
Yes.
Again,
Well, there's 3 waters too. Sue, you had your hand up.
I was just thinking, in talking about the Moed and the Moedim, and it begins at the beginning of the year.
Okay, so she's saying, because it might not show up on the tape, I'm just going to reiterate. When you're talking about the Moed, the first Moed starts at the beginning of the year, right? He gives us the reference of, as Tim was teaching, he gives us the reference of the equinox, because the equinox cuts into the year. The year is just a circle, and a circle has no end or beginning. So when you all of a sudden were to shoot shoot an arrow into the circle, now you've pierced and you've designated a beginning. So the first Moed starts at the equinox, which is a cutting or partitioning of the year. Okay, so now you're saying that this het is like the year that has been pierced by the arrow as the equinox to designate a beginning of the year. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Interesting that Tim kind of came to that same conclusion a few minutes ago. Anybody else? We're running out of time, so I'm just trying to... Okay, so Tim, could you verbalize how you read this, just as an option? Now I'll unbridle the... I can't verbalize. But go ahead, just try. Give it a shot.
Tim, nervous?
Richard, you want to? You were able to articulate it pretty well. You want to give it a shot?
what did we have? Okay, the appointed time,
The appointed times.
when the appointed time,
When the appointed time.
and seasons.
Times and seasons are the same thing, so he's now reading it twice.
Are broken open.
Sprouting the fence, the treasure box is finally opened up. That which has been locked as a mystery, hidden, taken away from us, is broken open, which is to say, such that we can make revealed and put the pieces together and see what is actually in there. Okay, that's a statement. Hang on. I was reading what he just said as ... Okay, what comes next? But if you put a period, then he's saying, now we have to look at the rest of the verse. But before we do that, he's saying, when, as if to say this is the end of this verse, the end of the statement, not the beginning of the statement, something else is going to happen, which the verse is talking about, when you guys properly regard the beginning of the festival seasons as pertaining to the equinox so that you can see what's really in this treasure box. And what's in the treasure box, remember, is a picture of the word chet kuf, which is translated as law or commandment. Remember, Torah is translated law, but het kuf is also translated as law, which is the fence, the chet, and the kuf, the pillar of smoke that was over it, and the pillar of fire as an exclamation point above the Ark of the Covenant, which is the kuf, the question mark and exclamation point embedded within that orthography icon shape, right? So, something will happen when you guys finally, remember, cross over this barrier. You guys finally regard my Moedim, which are my witnesses and testimonies, as per maybe the timing appropriate to the equinox, which is to say finally register it rightly. Now, I'm not necessarily validating equinox as being the time of the beginning of the year. Tim is, I'm not trying to be a partisan of telling you this is right and this is wrong. I'm trying to help you translate, just so you know. I'm trying to be a non-partial administrator here, just so you know. Tim is a non-partial, he is a partial administrator. Go ahead. Go ahead. Throw it in, Jim. Tim.
If you can articulate the words, when in Isaiah 14, when our adversary said that he was going to usurp the power and he was going to take over the Mount of Congregation, that would be the timing inside of that fence. That sprout that is grow inside of that fence. How does he take over?
Okay, when Tim's invoking this Isaiah 14, where the adversary says, I will presume upon or take over the Mount of Congregation. The Mount, we'd have to look and see exactly how it was written in Hebrew, but the concept of the Mount of the Congregation is a place where you're congregating, right there on the mountain, right? The place of the congregation. Well, the word moed is the congregation. Not only does ayin dalet mean jewel or witness or testimony or the word until or booty, that which is lost, it's also an assembly of those that are appointed to gather. So it's a military term, meaning if a certain platoon or a certain battalion is told to be at a certain place at a certain time, then that army amasses there at that time. And anybody who's not there at that time is found to be lacking or in violation of that order. So if Yahweh gives an order, Zadi Yod, to congregate Moed, then those who are obeying his orders are at that congregation at that time. And if what I just said is if you look in the dictionary under Moed, that's what it says. Only I phrased it with a little bit more sentence structure than they just gives you. But it's to be those who are found doing. Remember, Yeshua said, when he goes away and he comes back, will he find faith on the earth? If the word is faithfulness, what he's saying is, I'm wondering, when I come back, will I find my people actually doing what I told them to do? Will I find them meeting when and where I told them to meet? Will I find faithfulness on the earth? And then remember, he gave parables of the guy who came and the bad stewards were ripping off things and taking it to their own advantage and blah, 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 all this other stuff. So what I'm invoking these other stories and plugging this into these three words because I'm showing you that the theme seems to be consistent with all the matters that we've brought up, and we're not bringing anything into this. We're not bringing doctrines. I'm trying to hold back doctrines. Not that you guys are throwing them in, but I'm just saying we're just looking at these three words. And this that I'm now saying is very important when I show you what these words are translated as saying. Yes?
Yeah, the word in Isaiah for congregation is actually more.
Yes. Now, we'd have to look. It's also kahal, which is assembly, so we'd have to go back and see. But I'm telling you, moed is, if you look in the dictionary under ayin dalet, it's a group assembled together by appointment. So when you have a man who's giving a legal statement and he has his two witnesses, that's legal because it's a group assembled together to validate the word being put onto the judicial inquiry, right? Yes?
I don't know the expenditure of mine, but I don't know what it means anything. Aaron's budded rod, what does that mean?
That occasion was, they were, forget that guy's name. Somebody was saying, hey, Moshe and Aaron and Miriam are taking over the camp at nepotism, and they're saying, hey, listen, okay, if Moses is the designated leader because the voice came down from Mount Sinai, keep your brother and sister out of it. You guys are not the family taking over, right? So Yahweh gave instruction, okay, all the leaders of the tribes, drop off your stick, and Yahweh will show who is supposed to be the one. So his broad-blooded, therefore saying, Yahweh appointed Aharon as being the high priest. So it wasn't just Moshe's nepotism that was doing it. This was actually authorized by Yahweh himself. So it was the proof that Yahweh did something. Proof that it was his. So this is my arrow. Now I'm going to invoke one other thing that nobody's mentioned. There was a place in Scripture where Yahweh says, Yehuda is my bow, and I'm going to fill it with Ephraim. Meaning Ephraim is his arrow. So we could look at this Chatzi, my arrow, and say, well, he's invoking Ephraim here as being my arrow, perhaps. Tim was saying equinox. But then it's like, well, what does my arrow, Ephraim, have to do with it? Well, what does Yahweh do with Ephraim? Yahweh's a man of war, it says in another place. Yehuda is my bow and Ephraim is my arrow. And when he brings the two sticks together, you could look at just two crossed sticks, or you could look at a bow and an arrow. When Yahweh brings back Yehuda and Ephraim together, what's going to happen? He's going to go to war? There's another picture there. What good is Ephraim going to do? Yehuda, a bow, remember now, I'm picturing...
They're going to keep his, they're going to do his treasures.
They're going to do his stuff, right? But remember, we've been showed pictures of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and there's one guy riding, holding a bow. I believe it was the white horse, but there's no arrows. And so people have said, oh, the white holding the bow, that's maybe the papacy, the Vatican, the Catholic Church over the years. And it's like, no, wait a minute. What if there's another way to read these things? What if there's another way to read the very prophecies that we've been handed? If you have a bow without an arrow, is that Yehuda not in league with Ephraim? I've made a point before. This is Ephraim rising. This is Ephraim coming back, as in Ezekiel 37. What would the world look like if Ephraim and Yehuda both got back at the appointed time as the appointed assembly, the two houses? One is the bow and the other one is the arrow. And they're in Yahweh's hand. Remember, Yahweh said when Ephraim and Yehuda punk out, go stupid, get into sorcery and divination, then he's going to pick up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who is his drawn sword, and he's going to chop up Ephraim and Yehuda, which is what he did. So he wants to use Ephraim and Yehuda as his bow and arrow, but when they fail him and betray him, he'll pick up the heathen nations, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and slaughter his own people. He said, Yeshua said, my father's the husbandman, I'm the vine, you guys are the branches. But if my own branches betray me, my father, the husbandman, will cut them off and throw them into the fire. Don't think we're too precious to be cut off and thrown in the fire. And if he would do that with his own natural branches, don't think that the branches grafted in from the wild vine will be spared. Paul, I believe, talks about that, or Peter. I mean, all these New Testament models bring in, Ephraim, don't think too much of yourself, that, oh yeah, we're going to come and save the day. No, we better keep the testimony. Now remember, mem can mean the place of the testimony, the time of the testimony. It can also mean the people who keep the testimony. When Ephraim decides to keep the testimonies of the Moedim, then I will pick him up and use him as my arrow. It could also be saying that. Well, what's going on here? Is there any Jews here? Did I miss somebody? Oh, this must be Ephraim. This must be Ephraim keeping the Moedim as appointed. That's what we're doing here this week. So Yahweh says, okay, then I will open up my treasure box and my garden will sprout and I will command the blessing. Now that means if we can read this properly, then we can hear it, we can choose to believe it, and then we can claim it. Name it and claim it. This is where that comes in. So we now, and this is, I'm saying this as if it's hypothetical or rhetorical, but this is a real prayer. Abba Yahweh, Melech HaOlam, King of the universe. We choose to be your people, Ephraim. I can't claim to be a Jew. I don't know my lineage, but I know that you scattered Ephraim to the 4 corners of the earth, scattered them as dust in the wind. And you said that we could come back. So we here collectively choose to come back. And as we come back, we admit that our forefathers profaned the covenant. We admit that we were taught to do sin, that we were taught to profane your words. We were taught to ignore you completely as if nothing mattered. So we confess the sins of our forefathers. We confess the sins of ourselves. We confess that we were taught, and we confess that we ran with it because we didn't know any better. But now we hear your words, so we choose to Shema. We choose to Shomer, and the reason why we're having any contention of thought is because Shomer is to remove the dregs, and we have to identify the difference between the puree, the fruit, and the dregs which we cast aside. So please help us by your Ruach. But we also hear that you will cause us to sprout because we are the seeds in your garden. The seed of your word in our heart is where your words are nurtured, and we are you said that the prayers of the saints was incense. And so here we give you our prayers. Heal us, strengthen us, polish, straighten the arrow to be used in your hand. Use each of us. Use us as a people group, as a nation, as your people. You said you would be our Elohim and we would be your people. We declare ourselves to be your people. Make us your people. You put us in your hand as the arrow. Fit us with Yehudah. Not putting them down because they are the bow and we are the arrow. So use us. Use us to exalt your glorious name across the face of the earth. Open your treasure box to us and fit us to be adorned by your name and by your Moedim and by your ways to your great glory. And we name it and claim it as our legal entitlement as per the covenant that you sealed with Abraham and through Moshe, that David rejoiced in, that Yeshua sealed emphatically and truly, verily, verily. And so we claim it as our privilege, our right, and our obligation to be true to it as the Kohanim Leolam, the priest to the world, as your royal priesthood. Thank you, Yahweh. Heal us and strengthen us. B'Shem Yeshua, by his blood, he authorized and sealed that all these things cannot be removed or denied forever, and we are yours unto eternity. Amen. Now you want to know where these words are found? No, it's in Daniel. I believe it's either Daniel, I think it's in Daniel 9. Daniel didn't say the words, the angel said the words, and it's simply translated English 2.5 years. I mean, excuse me, 3.5 years. They translated this time, singular, times, plural. So that must be 1 plus 2, and this is a half. So it's 1 plus 2 plus a half is 3.5. They translated this as the words 3.5 years. What was lost?
Everything.
Now then, you have to go back and look at that phrase 3.5 years and plug in this entire understanding, fit into that place of the rest of the sentence, of the rest of the discussion, and say, what does this understanding in that place mean? And what do you do with this? Remove the dregs. Will somebody please take the garbage out? This notion of 3.5 years? Your entire world has just been altered.
Blown away. Not altered. Blown right out.
You're gonna have to explain it. I just lost it.
You want to explain to her, Richard? You got your finger up. What's up?
Could you say that, because I was lost in the morning, I don't know, I'm sorry.
Go back and watch the tape. No, go ahead.
Could it be that the 3.5 is one level?
Yes.
That this is going to happen in the last 1,260 days of Earth's history?
Might be that.
Because in that white horse with Yeshua just holding the bow, the arrow's already been shot. And what I'm seeing
Maybe.
with Revelation is in those seals, the 144,000 are sealed, and you get indication of that in chapter 7. And then in chapter 8, the trumpets start to sound, and that's when the harvest is ready, and the loud-cry people go out. They've been shot. they've gone out, they're sealed, they're going out now with this loud cry of this message, and the trumpets are opening up chaos in the world, so that there's an awakening. It's happening now. There's an awakening around the world. Something's going on. But in the last 3.5 years, where there'll be a harvest, where they can bring in the people back to the worship of the Moedim and find all the treasures in that box. They can get out of the fence. I don't know. They sprout. Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, what exactly is the treasure? Because obviously it's more than just the feast and the festival.
But it's worship, it's adoration, it's coming into his presence, it's being one with him.
Okay, now just so you know what's happening here, because I invoked the standard, this is 3.5 years, the angel's telling Daniel about it, she instantly plugged this into Revelation. That's not wrong, but see, you didn't do that before. No, that's okay. No, I'm not putting that down, but I'm trying to show you why I didn't tell you where this is found. Because as soon as I said where it's found, instantly what comes up, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but instantly what comes up is all these other things of books and teachings and timings and doctrine, and they might all be right. I'm not saying they're not, but I wanted to give you this as a child where none of those other things could cloud your mind, because as soon as it's mentioned, whoosh, they come in like a tsunami, and you're suddenly now what you have to do, and this is what you can do collected together, is you now have to take what this was, and I tried to keep it pure for you. You now have to take it, and like I said, plug it into all these other things. And I'm certainly not saying you're right or wrong, but when you say he's holding a bow, so the arrows have already been shot, maybe not. Maybe he's holding a bow because that's a picture of Judah without Ephraim in the picture. And soon as Ephraim comes back to life, remember Zodi also means resurrection. Ezekiel 37, this is the grave and this is the resurrection of Yahweh's arrow. So as soon as Ephraim comes back to life and says, let's do the Moedim, Hebrew roots movement, then suddenly it shifts from the guy on the white horse without an arrow in his bow to the next horse, whatever that is. I'm just trying to show you a different model, maybe.
Where's the arrow in that red sentence?
Chatz is arrow. Chetzadi is the word that's translated as arrow.
Somehow, I see, not from what I learned before, but what I see is that Ephraim's been scattered for a long, long time, but when they come back, they're going to come back like racehorses. Judah's had this material, they've had it.
Sure.
Because they came back to Jerusalem.
Yeah, but they didn't have an eye for the door, and Yeshua said, I'm the door. They were robbed of that.
But they're the ones that came back.
Sure.
Ephraim was scattered, they didn't come back.
The southern kingdom came back, not the northern.
That's right. So when Ephraim comes back, really comes back, they're going to be like an arrow. They're going to be like racehorses out the gate. I think they're going to go past Judah. But yes, they will join hands, but they're going to be going back.
Well,
It's like
sure.
your first love, you lose it, and when you come back, after you lost your first love for a while, you're out the gate and you don't look.
Well, you launch the arrow. The arrow leaves the bow and goes and does. Anyway, Tim, you wanted to say something too? You were.
I was just telling you, we got about 8 minutes, 9 minutes.
Okay, I can show you one other thing to kick this into a whole nother orbit. Not to leave you this, but just to leave you on the record of the camera. Does anybody else want to say anything about this? I'm gonna erase it. I can't answer that. We already spent an hour saying what they thought 3.5 years means. So now you're befuddled, and that's why you need to discuss with each other in other groups that we don't have time for in the last 10 minutes, because I'm going to show you something else. Okay, I'm going to erase this. Any other questions?
Jesus' ministry is
Might have been 70 weeks. That's Michael Rood's teaching. That's another thing that we might have been lied about. But anyway, I'm going to erase this. Okay. Any other statements? Okay. Now we just took quite a while going over one sentence. I'm going to show you one other sentence, and we can only spend 5 minutes on it, 10 minutes, say, because what this talk was supposed to be about is the word for time. So I'm going to write one other sentence. And just so you know, when I do it, I usually write the Hebrew in red, or the Paleo Hebrew in red, and then all the other colors, there's my, as you can see, if you leave it in red, there's the words, and then all the other, okay, here. What? Okay, here's another sentence. This one hopefully will be easier. This is part of a verse also, another place. Here's that word, ein dalet. Remember, it's translated as until, which, as you noticed, if you put it in the form of moed, this is the word pronounced ed, it means when, because it's a progression in time until something happens. And remember, it's a witness or testimony, which means it's actually also evidence, and emphatic evidence is actually proof. So here's some kind of a proof of something. Now, just so you know, this is the word spelled Eden, as in the Garden of, this is not working, the Garden of Eden. This is the word Eden, ein dalet nun. Eden. And as the word Eden, it says in the dictionary, it's like a garden. The Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. The Garden of Eden is a place that's well watered. Now you have to take that as a picture and say, what's the difference between a garden and the rest of your land? A garden has your particular attention. And so because it's valuable, it's the place of your precious food and or flowers, you put a fence around it. So the Garden of Eden had a fence put around it. That's just what it is. And it's a place that you water. So it says right outside the garden had 4 rivers going into it. That's a picture of the laver. When they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they went back to the place where they were taken from, which was the soil, and he tilled it. Okay, so well, this is inside the Mishkan, excuse me. You could see this. Here was Eden. There was a place where he was sent to till the soil. That's like the laver. The altar of sacrifice. The laver is like the headwaters of the 4 rivers. And here's the place that was the garden in Eden. And when Cain sinned, he got kicked out to the land of Nod. And the word Nod means wandering, which is being dispersed across the face of the earth, basically. When you nod off to sleep, you go wandering off. So there's other themes playing here. So in the Garden of Eden was a fenced place, and Eden is like this whole fence. But anyway, what I'm saying is a fenced place that you protect and that you water, that you nurture and care for is Eden. And then this, when you add a Yod Nun, remember we were saying Shabbat, Shabbaton. In Shabbat, you really rest. In your rest, you really rest. When you watch, you really watch. You're diligent. When you hear, you're really listening. So when you add a Yod Nun to it, it's the increase of that, which is also the word Rabbah or Mayod, which is to pump it up. So this is where you get the word, in English, hedon or hedonism. So this word adnin is ramped up hedon. So this is like really, really good. Or in hedonism is if you're a Christian, it's a bad word. But it's also where you get the word that something is really tastes good or really pleasant. It actually, Eden means pleasant and delightful. So this means like it's really, really good. Now, if you look at the entire history of the world from the beginning to the end, I think cavemen, Neanderthals, people having to use horses and buggies and bows and arrows, and now we got machine guns and airplanes and automobiles. Our weapons are better, our transport's better, we got hot and cold running water, we've got all this great stuff. We can go to the grocery store and buy food, buy frozen ice cream. There was a time when only the emperor could have ice cream. And the way he got it was that he had a series of runners in a relay. And these guys, somebody would run all the way up to the Alps, grab some ice, and have to run a certain quantity back so that by the time he got back to the emperor's table, there was still some ice so that he could throw in some puree and have some frozen. It's like, I can just walk down the street and get ice cream. I mean, this is a time of Edenin, I'll tell you. Edan, Adnin vepeleg Eden. So this word Eden is exactly the same as this word here. Now Peleg, it says in the days of Peleg, after the flood, the earth was divided. So this word here means divided. Two ways to read that. And I've heard this as theorizing of other scripture, right? It means that there was a single continent, Pangea, and somehow it shifted and it broke up and now we have 7 continents. But it might mean, this is another theory, that after the flood, people are going like, whoa, what just happened? The world was shifted on its axis. There was this upheaval and they said, what's going on? Well, let's go figure it out. Some guys got on boats and they went sailing around and then they made maps. Here's a continent, there's a continent, they're about this big because those guys were great mariners. They weren't a bunch of Neanderthals and troglodytes, cave dwellers, but these guys were really smart. Other people looked at the stars and divided it up and figured out longitude and latitude to figure out exactly what's going on. Other really, really smart guys back then figured out sundials so they could divide the earth and the way it fit into the universe. You might be able to read Peleg legitimately as that. Okay, so what this sentence reads is, until or when Eden, which is protected or watered, nurtured, a place where beautiful things grow, and then that gets amped up to where it's really delightful, really wonderful. Again, it's not negative, it's just, and I can look at society today and say, we got some pretty cool stuff. Computers, houses, central heat, grocery stores, automobiles, airplanes. I mean, I think me getting on an airplane and flying up here is adnin. That's my take on it. You know, to take a nice warm shower, that's adnin. Computer, to be standing here collectively and nobody shooting guns and trying to yell stupid nonsense at us, that's adnin. Now, maybe it'll get better than this. I don't know, because what we got to find out is when is or what is this talking about, okay? And we can only do this in the next few minutes. So I tried to carefully, gently, elaborately show you that other phrase, and now I want you to do quickly off the spur of your mind, from the heart, what is this saying? In Peleg, or divided, Eden. This word Eden is exactly the same as this. And remember, this word ayin dalet is this word. And that word ayin dalet, as we discussed, it's translated as until or when. It's a progress of time, but it's also witness and testimony and jewel and something lost, which is booty, which is your jewels being stolen by the thieves. And it's a group assembled together by appointment. It's a treasure. It's also understanding the door, as it were, which is to say when? When do we go through the door? Until certain something. Until what? Until the protected place gets really wonderful. What is it that's divided? Well, the Eden is divided. The protection is divided. What does that mean? Is it divided by multiplying? Or is it dividing, meaning that it's partitioned like the continents ripping apart from the Pangea, one continent? Or does it mean divided, meaning multiplied? If it's translated divided, here, let me look up and think about it. I don't want to crowd your thoughts, but I'm going to look up the word in the dictionary to tell you. Pei Lamed Gimel. Could be set apart. Again, I'm not going to tell you, I'll tell you in a few minutes where this comes from, but I want you to put your illiterate minds to this and figure out what this means. I'm going to read what Peleg means in the dictionary. To cleave, to split or divide.
Cleave is clean.
Well, cleave meaning separate, like a cleaver,
Okay.
and cutting meat. Separated himself. Okay, there's divide. So you're right there. I mean, to separate yourself. That's make Kodesh, right? Kodesh means kuf dalet shin, to separate, divide, like the partition wall in the Mishkan. This is one separation wall in the Mishkan. Is separating Eden. This is all Eden, right? This fence, I mean, literally, this is a picture of the Garden of Eden. Eden is a fenced place. The land of Nod or wandering is outside. That's like the Mishkan. The Garden of Eden was a place separated inside Eden, and then the most set apart place, remember, is this Zadi, is the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, which was very much set apart. So the Garden of Eden is a layup of the tabernacle model. Peleg also means turned aside, diverted, put off, removed, or exaggerated, probably meaning he went too far. So somebody might look at you guys and saying, listen, you've just gone too far with this Boker, gone too far with these Moabite, gone too far with these words. That's Peleg. So this might be talking about us looking at his stuff, thinking it's pleasant, delightful. Now we're at this Moed saying, this stuff is really pleasant and delightful. Now you've gone too far. You've stepped outside our sanctioned sitting in the pews and listening to the preacher. What do you think you're doing? You're not learned. Where did he get his shmiha? That word shmiha, they said that of Yeshua basically. Shmiha is the authorized doctrines taught in the universities, synagogue, from the true preachers that have letters after the name. And if anybody thinks themselves to be too uppity to step outside the authorized, is where did you get your sanction? Where did you get your shmiha? That's a Jewish word. Yes?
Where do you think you're getting off trying to understand God's word for yourself?
Exactly. I'm saying all this, what we just expressed, can be an interpretation of this word Peleg. Until the time that the things of Eden that he gave us that are pleasant and delightful, that's the stuff in the Torah that we were told is not pleasant and delightful. The stuff that nobody else appreciates, that we not only appreciate, but go, hallelujah, woohoo, thank you. A place where there's healing. A place where everything happens. There's the life. Now, what does this word mean? Peleg? I mean, set apart, removed. You're no longer fit for our congregation. Goodbye. There's the door. You're out of here, which we discussed earlier can happen and does happen. Peleg is also a brook, a stream, or a channel, or something cleft. It also means part or half. It's also a waiter in a restaurant. A waiter in a restaurant. It also is migraine, head, because that's half of your brain, right? Migraine literally means half your head has got something going on with the blood vessels. Pain on one side of the head. Or you guys used to be part of our fellowship. You cause us to think. Now you're a pain in half of our head. Please be excused. Literally, that's this word. I know, we've just got 2 minutes left. It's the word for division. Pelega, and let me see if there's one word. Pelegon, if you put a noon at the end of this, it means a separatist, a sectarian. Now you're causing trouble. You're messing things up. You're breaking things apart. Yes?
Unless we become a pain in the butt, this won't happen.
And you have to become a pain in the butt? That's what it sounds like. Your butt's cut in half, so you got half this and half the same picture. I wasn't looking. I was just saying. You know. Pelagti is of a company, a military. You know, this force, this battalion, this, you know. Can I have some more of that kick-ass coffee that Brenda made me? Kick that part of the ass out of the group, please. He's being a donkey of such words that we don't want to... Okay. What does this mean? We're going to say what this means, and then I'll tell you where it's found. You got like a minute and a half left. Anybody? What do you see in this sentence? Shiloh. What is it? What do you see?
Are you talking the top line?
No, the whole thing. This is one sentence. Ed Adan Adnin ve Peleg Adan.
So repeat it 3 times, seeing the door, and then you've got 3 shot out to the fish jumping out. Kinda, right? At the top there, actually, let's repeat it 4 times.
Put that into words.
4 means door.
Okay. So you're saying there's 4 doors. Hey, remember, now that she invoked 4 doors, in Leviticus 26, he said 4 times, 4 is a door, that if you didn't keep the words that I told you, then by 7, like your sworn vow, 7 times things are going to get worse and worse. So again, we're crazy 8s. We're saying, oh, there's a 4. Hey, that's a door. And what? Oh, Leviticus 26. So if 4 times he said, if you don't come back and do what I said, and value the stuff I gave you as precious flowers and fruits and vegetables in my garden, and appreciate them for what they really are, my precious treasure, then your enemies are going to come in, stomp all over the garden, tear apart all your treasures. I'm going to call them in, and you're going to lose everything until the time that you come back. That's what he said in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. And Deuteronomy 30 is where the return is. But anyway, so what are you seeing? You're seeing the 4 doors, so I'm invoking Leviticus 26, but what else do you see in terms of tying this all together?
If you reverse it, you're going to get the blessing.
If you reverse what?
Well, there's 4 doors, we threw it all away. If we come back, it's going to come back.
Okay, so what you're saying is if we teshuvah, could somebody, while we're doing this, as a closing song, not to step on Sigrid, but could somebody find on their computer Teshuvah by Lydia Zaslow? Could you do that so we can play it at the very end? You mind looking it up? Teshuvah, T-E-S-U-S-H-U-V-A, Teshuvah by Lydia Z-A-S-L-O-W, Zaslow. Okay, while they're doing that, somebody else, please tell me while we've only got a moment left.
So we start out with just the door. We see the door. It's just very basic.
See the door, I endowed it.
Yeah. And then now we kind of
No.
grasping something greater.
Now remember, hang on, let me fill this in. Dal at noon, there's a noon after the door. See the door, and then noon is an action. So you could say, don't just see the door, but do something. Go through the door, or engage the door, or put what you see into action, and then
Another expansion.
this is another expansion of that same action. Okay, so as they say, in spades, right? You do it, and then really do it. You shema, and really hear, and then something is divided, or separated, or fragmented, or partitioned.
From Eden,
Huh?
from Eden, the next word.
And this is that same word again. What's separated? Something about the doing of what you think you see is divided. And remember, like a migraine, this is the word, this is also migraine, which can mean half your head. Excuse me? Well, there could be something about a headache going there, certainly. Again, I'm not trying to say, well, it doesn't really mean that. No, we have to look at the whole picture. So the benefit of the dictionary is that instead of being restricted to the vowel points, I'm trying to look at every possible meaning that these 3 letters incorporate to help us. This is what I call sephering. Sefer, Samik Peresh, or sleuthing, or doing the detective work of trying to recreate what he's telling us without regard of doctrines or translations. Just so you know what I do, what you can do, is I find something in the text, blah, 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 reading it in English. Oh, that sounds like an interesting subject. I look at the Hebrew words, I write them down, and then I close, so I'm not looking at the translation anymore. So by writing them in Paleo, it even takes me away from the traditional translation that you'll see on the internet, and then I'm looking at words and letters. That's all we're doing. You guys are functionally doing translation. And just so you know, the word sefer, Samik Peresh, means book or scroll. The word sofer, Samik Vav Peresh, right, the stick with a nail in it, the book with a nail in it, is the word for scribe. It's the English word super, supreme, soprano, super, this the Vav in between the Peresh, which is the highest and the best. Doing this work of translation according to the Hebrew language is the highest and best of any earthly pursuit. What we're doing here is the highest and best, the super, the soprano, the supreme of any human endeavor. Just so you know.
So until Eden becomes delightful, we're going to be divided from Eden.
Oh, there's a way. Until you find that my garden is delightful, then you will be divided and separated from the delight. But now, that from the delight might have a mem, but he can certainly read that in there. That's one way to read it. Anybody else?
We have man who is pain. Is that the same? Man says.
Man's mouth, okay, a man's mouth.
Revealing what's in the heart.
An instruction, this is Lamed Gimel. Where do you get heart?
Well, it's regard.
Okay, lamed is teach and learn. Something about an open mouth, teaching and learning instructions, and gimel, remember, like a boomerang, is they sent away, but you could say man was sent out. Okay, Israel was cast out because they refused to adhere to the instructions that he spoke to them. You could say that. So the nation of Israel was divided and cast to the world as dust in the wind. The rock was crumbled and fragmented and like sand on the seashore and dispersed.
So were Adam and Eve.
And so were Adam and Eve. So was Cain and Abel. That's another way to read Peleg. That's great. And then what?
And so isn't that end kind of, once we grasp that other part, then that's when we're that whole complete, embracing all that he's given us?
Well, as she was saying, that if this is talking about the door telling us what happened, then the inverse is also true, which is teshuvah, which is why I wanted this song played, saying we can come back and reverse the curse. We can turn the whole thing around like the turn of the year, right? So as we were saying earlier, there's two heads of the year. There's two, as it were, heads of the month. As it were, the lunar thing, not to invoke that, but you got the conjunction and the full moon. You've got the beginning, the Aviv, and you go out to the Rashon, the head, the Rosh, and then you turn it back and you come back to the Aviv, and then you turn around and start a new year and you come back to the Rosh, the 7th month, and then you turn around. So it's this back and forth. That's a gimmeling action. But there's two turnarounds. There's the Aviv and there's the Rosh. But is Rosh the head, or is the Rashon translated as beginning first? So that's what I'm saying. There's this confusion in Hebrew because it's both. It's a turnaround. It's like a rodeo barrel race. You run out on your horse, you turn around the barrel, and you come back. That's the Rosh. It's the turnaround. So for the Jews to call Yom Teruah Rosh Hashanah, the turnaround head of the year, is true. But they celebrate it as New Year because actually it's a civil New Year. That's when laws and kings and stuff are coronated. But Yahweh said this will be the beginning of your year at the Aviv in the springtime. Okay, did you find the recording? He's still looking. Huh? Oh, Brenda can get it on her cell phone. You're not connected to the internet. Okay, I'm now going to tell you what this verse is translated as. Are you ready? Does anybody else have anything they want to throw in? Okay, this verse is translated until or at the time of 3.5 years. Time, times, and the dividing half of time. This is the other place where 3.5 years is mentioned in prophecy. This is 3.5 years. 1, 2.5 of 1. It's the same translation as what we just did, but it's the other place in Daniel. One's chapter 9, the other one's chapter 12, I believe, or one's 11 and one's 12. I forget where it is. 7 and 12. What just happened?
Until we're there in that time, this is going to happen.
Say that again.
Until we're there at that time.
Until we're where? Finding his stuff delightful?
Yeah.
Then we will be divided and this stuff won't happen. That's one way to take it. Again, what I've tried to show you.
3.5. I mean, where did they get 3.5 out of that?
Because the word ayin dalet is until, which has a reference of time. And remember, the question originally
Yeah, but if
was
if that's Eden, it's not time. So where's time?
because if you look at the dictionary translation, Eden is not just a place where things are delightful, but it's a time when things are delightful. I'm trying to show you why the translators do what they do, and why, if you know this,
So there's a place.
you'll see that you are probably more fit and apt as translators than even the professional translators are.
So there's a place and time when this will happen?
You might say this is both place and time. So this whole thing that we're talking about is because Brenda had asked for a discussion on the word for time. Are you hearing any of this, Brenda, or are you lost? Okay, I just want to make sure. So the reason I'm saying this is because you can sit here now looking at these words and letters in Hebrew, which you could never do before, and say, what the heck have these translators been trying to pull?
Yeah.
They've completely pulled a curtain or the wool over our eyes or something. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong, but what I'm saying is they may see something at one surface level, but there's all this stuff going on underneath. And you guys, being illiterate, And that's a whole other thing which I could talk about tomorrow if you want. But you guys being illiterate were able to see something that the great noble translators didn't tell you even after 3,000 years, actually 2,500 years of these words being in existence.
So they got the tip of the iceberg and now we're gonna.
Well, yeah, but even whether it's legitimate or not, then you'll have to decide that for yourself. But what I'm saying is this
They saw, not giving us anything else.
That's right. So this exact phrase, Ed Adan Adnin Vepeleg Aden, is translated 3.5 years. Time times and half a time. The exact same phrase, Moedim Vechatzi, is also translated 3.5 years, time times and half a time. And because of time times and half a time, oh, that equals 1260. Oh, that ties in Revelation. Oh, that ties into Christian eschatology. Woof! We've gone and we've completely lost the message that's back here. That's what I'm trying to show you.
There's an old saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. The rabbis are not teaching us how to fish.
But hopefully, I think you now have just learned how to fish. There you go. And it all has to do with knowing what these letters mean and how to recognize something in the dictionary.
We can go fishing for ourselves.
Now you can go fishing. And it might just be a stick with a string and a little worm.
Go fish the net.
Okay.
Can I see one more thing? Dalit Noon is also judging.
Yes. Dalit Nun is also the din, the word for judge or make a decision of going through the door. Exactly. Can you find it or no? Won't come up?
Paul and Lydia?
Yeah, Lydia Zaslow, Teshuva. Lydia, Z-A-S-L-O-W. I think her first name is Lydia, L-Y-D-I-A. If you just punch in the word Teshuva and then Zaslow, it should come up. And it should be a black screen with white letters.
I actually have the words for it from when we did it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. I just thought you'd appreciate it. It's very simple with a guitar.
It's not popping up.
You're not getting it, huh?
And I don't think if you remember it well enough to sing
Yeah, I do.
it. Okay, we can sing it.
Yeah, unless she can find the song. Yeah.